What up, guys? This is kiodiekin. Oh, Sookie Sue. Sookie Sue, we got Retropie on the Raspberry Pi 5 brought to you by the Supreme Team. We're going to take a look at it. We're going to get this bad boy loaded up. We're going to discuss all the positives about it. What can this thing emulate? What can the Supreme Team bring you? As you guys know, they were the first to bring you the Raspberry Pi emulation Retropie on the Pi 4, the Pi 4 8GB model, Orange Pi 5, and of course other single board computers in the past with full speed, full power. So I'll be showing you guys what this thing can do, what is supported, how far they've been able to push the build, and the possibilities of other emulation that compares to some of the other front ends that have been out there. And yes, PS2 does work. We'll get into that a little bit later. But, you know, fortunately, due to a lot of the things that we've been working on in the past few months with the Orange Pi 5, fortunately, a lot of those settings, especially like the video loading screens and stuff that originally didn't work on the Orange Pi 5, it catapulted us to understand and get a head start on the Raspberry Pi 5. So without further ado, we're going to get this thing loaded up. We're going to test all the settings, take a look at everything that this has to offer. Right now, I am using a USB 256GB storage drive. Obviously, you can use an SD card with this as you will. And I am jumping a little bit ahead of myself because I know I have several other Raspberry Pi 5 tutorials. But we've had this now for a couple of weeks. Some of the devs have actually gotten this work. We've been helping with testing, voltage concerns, etc., etc. I don't know the estimated time frame as to when this will be released publicly, but today this is just a showcase for you to enjoy. So let's get into it. You know what time it is. All right, so here we have it. We have the new Supreme build for the Raspberry Pi 5. So again, this has been a work of art, work of grace, a lot of time, and people have spent time just trying to get this as to where this needs to be. And again, if it wasn't for the Orange Pi 5, understanding how that works and migrating a lot of the settings over, then we would have been further behind. So I do have this loaded up for you, 256GB image. I have a number of different arcade titles and console titles loaded on here for you just to give you a better idea about what this would potentially look like. But the main joy of this will be the scripts. Now, so far we've been able to emulate up to PS2. Some of the emulation in terms of, let's say, N64, PlayStation 2, and some of the other consoles, they're a little bit spotty, but for the most part, this is a significant upgrade from the Raspberry Pi 4. We got some PS2 games here. You guys will see a little bit of this later on here in the showcase. PSP, PlayStation, again, all the basic titles. I'm not going to spend any time going over this because, as you know, PlayStation and some of the other games or systems from previous genres or previous systems will work on here, like your Vectrex, your Virtual Boy, your Super Nintendos. Sega Model 3, that's what this is right here. This all runs perfectly fine. There's been significant improvements to the Nintendo Wii due to some video performances. Nintendo Wii does run pretty excellent, pretty well on this. But let's go ahead and take a look at some of the settings. We're going to go ahead and take a look at some of the new scripts that are on here, and I haven't seen as many scripts on here in a long time. So we got our splash screens. We can have your option to show your IP. Additionally, right now I am clocked at about 2700 megahertz, which is 2.7 gigahertz, and then my GPU is about 800 or 900, I want to say. You don't have to overclock. I haven't noticed any performance enhancements by overclocking. All right, so first up on the list, we have Time Crisis 3 for the PlayStation 2. This required a lot of optimization. It's one of my favorite light gun games in the series, and I have this running pretty well. We are using Asterix. There are two different versions of Asterix. I'm using the regular Asterix. I believe there's also an Asterix Direct. We're running, you can run this anywhere between 1080p to about 640 without really any optimal or performance issues. So Asterix is the preferred emulator to use if you are using a low-powered single board computer. I am aware that there are other PlayStation 2 emulators out there. However, those only use 2 cores. However, Asterix uses 4 cores, and it is much more optimal for a single board computer. But again, there are a limited number of games that can run full speed on the PlayStation for PlayStation 2 on the Raspberry Pi 5. Again, there is a lot of settings and a lot of tweaking that you do need to do, but this was more or less a really good, enjoyable experience. I did test this on the Pi 5 4 and 8 gigabyte model. Pretty much had the same type of performance issues. I know there's been some other tests in the past where it showed Geekbench where the Pi 5 4 gigabyte model had a little bit of a performance increase, but in my additional testing, which I will show you guys in some other the next upcoming videos, I didn't really see anything that was to alert anybody of any issues. So if you get the 8 gigabyte version or the 4 gigabyte model, you will be happy with the performance on any one of these running this particular build. This build is ready to go with light gun connectivity. However, you will need to adjust or set up your own personal light guns. The send-in light gun script has been updated, and it is included in this build as well. If you guys are familiar with Supreme Ultra 2.0, this is send-in ready to go out of the box, but again, you will need to set up all of your individual controllers. Now, the other thing about Asterix, because I know a lot of you are going to be new to this, is that when you set up your controls in RetroArch, Asterix emulator is independent and is on its own. So none of the settings that you go ahead and adjust or set up in RetroArch, like your controller or whatnot, will correspond or translate over to the Asterix emulator. I have a separate video on that which you guys could check out. So when you go into the Asterix emulator, you will need to set up your own individual controller, your own light gun, outside of the normal RetroArch system. Connectivity is really great. I love Asterix. It's the best emulator for PlayStation 2 emulation if you are using a single board computer, because it does take advantage of all 4 cores. But we'll be speaking about that in some upcoming videos. But the gameplay here was really great. I was really excited to go ahead and get this up and running, and hope you guys enjoy it too. Next on the list, we have Virtual Cop Elite Edition. Now, this game is pretty cool. It has both Virtual Cop and Virtual Cop 2 on here. This is for the PlayStation 2. We are running full speed, no hiccups, no issues, and this was a really exciting game. So this is something else you guys can look forward to on the Raspberry Pi 5. Here we have some emulation and gameplay from Time Crisis 2 on the PlayStation 2. So this one took a lot of tinkering and working in order to get it work. And for the first time ever, we do have Vulkan fully integrated and working for the PlayStation 2 directly for this particular emulator. I know we had it in the past. We removed it from some of the Supreme builds, but this emulator is fully taking advantage of it. Now, I do know in some cases Vulkan does kind of slow down some of the performance issues. If you guys are familiar with my Pi Resurrection OP5 image, we're using OpenGL. So it does run really good on here for right now. We're looking to see if we can make some additional adjustments. But as you can see, the gameplay here is pretty smooth on the Pi 5. Now, I know most of you are probably looking for, it's like, why should I upgrade from a Pi 4 to a Pi 5? And the general sense of it is, it's great. It's a great idea. It's a great investment to move up from the Pi 4 to the Pi 5. But however, we still are limited in how and what we can get this thing to emulate in terms of making that a jump. We'll probably know exactly what we can run from a full stability wise with additional optimizations. We'll probably know that here in the next few weeks. But I will love to say that a lot of the games that didn't run well on the Pi 4 will run on the Pi 5. Case in point, Die Hard the Arcade. Now, if you guys remember Retromania, which was made by Wolfenos, he had the best outstanding performance on Die Hard the Arcade for the Pi 4. However, it did crash once you got to the parking lot level, but this is running pretty good. Most of it is at full speed. There are still some sound issues, which is an emulation issue, and that has nothing to do with the hardware per se, which brings me to my next point. Is a lot of the arcade games such as NFL Blitz, Killer Instinct, and so forth, some of them do kind of run at full speed, but there's still audio hiccups and whatnot. And if you guys watched my live stream I did a few weeks ago, we kind of touched on how we could get the best optimizations and so forth on some of these single board computers, because we've already reached the threshold where single board computers like the Pi 5, can run a lot of these games, but because it is an ARM architecture, we're not getting the full advantages of the emulation on some of these games. But Die Hard the Arcade is running full speed. There's still some audio glitches, hiccups that are omitted from the game. That's nothing that we can really do to fix that, but again, that has all to do with the optimizations and the architecture that we are working with. Killer Instinct does run somewhat at a full speed, as well as NFL Blitz. I know there's other videos that are showcasing it running at full speed, but it's still fast forwarded and the audio is definitely off. But these are some of the things that you have looked forward to on the Supreme build, where you are getting a better improvement over what we've released in the past, just from the power and the performance that the Raspberry Pi 5 does have to offer. And here we go with some more light gun action. This is Virtual Cop Elite Edition. This is the first one. Again, light gun connectivity is working. However, I am using a controller for the sake of this video review. Everything's running great. There's no slowdown. Everything is running pretty fine here. I'm not overclocked too much on this particular instance. However, I did try gameplay at 3 gigahertz where the GPU was at 1000, I do believe it was. Or actually, no, it was at 2900 because there were some issues where I overclocked it and the system would pretty much crash if I took it up too high using the gaming front ends, which I warn you guys, please make sure you have a well-suited case and fan and open air conditions, because the highest temps that I've gotten running PlayStation 2 and emulation was somewhere about 56 degrees, and that's really, really hot compared to with my open air case. Some of the other guys that were already throttling or hitting about 77. So please make sure that you have a great case and you run at optimal settings. But for the most part, overclocking isn't really needed to get most of these games running at full speed. But it is impressive to know this is exactly how far that we've come. As far as the Supreme Marquee tool, I know a lot of you are probably wondering about that. There will be work added on to the future to integrate that. We have not gotten there as of yet, but the performance on this is really good. I could definitely recommend this to a number of my friends, and we'll only see in the future as far as what we could get to run a little bit better on the Raspberry Pi 5. All right, so because Asterisk is a new emulator that is brought over to the Raspberry Pi series, I want to give you guys a quick look at the settings menu. So we have here in our settings, these is our graphics. And as you can see, Vulkan is set to your default on here. You have your system, you have your settings, you can adjust your graphics, your emulation, as well as your controllers. Again, I do have a dedicated video on this. This is where you can set up your DualShock controllers, your USB light guns as well. And then, of course, make all of your additional adjustments for optimization for your emulation. But again, all of this has to be set up differently than your standard RetroArch. RetroArch does not talk to this specific emulator. Now, in our next section, we have our ports. Ports, you'll find your send-in light gun menu if you guys need to plug in your send-in light gun. Your Gun 4 IR, your AE light gun, those are mouse controlled. All you need to do is just plug those in and you will be good to go. Now, of course, you will need to set up your settings for your Gun 4 IR and your AE light gun, but those will be plug and play ready. It's just plug it in, it operates as a mouse, adjust all of your settings for RetroArch, and you'll be fine there. We also added KDE Plasma Desktop instead of Pixel. However, there is an option when you go to the video loading screens, you can hit A, B, whatever, if you want to select which desktop you want to use. I know Pixel was in there. Haven't fully loaded that up, but KDE Plasma Desktop is really nice, which allows you to have a desktop experience built into the Retropie base. Something else you guys will be familiar with, if you guys are familiar with my other OP5 Pi Resurrection, where we first introduced cloud gaming to the retro gaming scene here on single board computers. Cloud gaming is available. Now, I do believe that you could go in here, play some of your Xbox games. I'm not sure if the other ones are set. We had duplicates of different scenarios. So if you want to do your Ant streaming, your Xbox gaming, NVIDIA cloud, and so forth, you can go ahead and register your account, set that up. Just make sure that you have a dedicated wired or wireless connection to take advantage of all of that gaming. And so you just have some additional options here to fully enjoy your Retropie gaming experience here on the Pi 5. And see, once you're loaded up, if you have a dedicated account, so again, in order to use a lot of the cloud gaming services, you do need to be registered. I think most people already have some type of gaming cloud experience. I, for one, love my Xbox, and I also have Steam. So these are some additional games that you could take advantage of. And it's cloud gaming. So yes, you can play your Gears of War, your Grand Theft Auto 5s, your Halo Infinites, your Forzas. Most of this all will run fluently. I haven't had any problems with stuttering or hiccups with doing some of these gamings. But again, we have separate videos on that to give you a better idea about some of this. And again, you also have access to other AAA titles such as Killer Instinct, Gears of War 5, Doom. And if you even want to play the N64 version, well, the Xbox version rather, of 007, you also have that as well. Now, as far as N64 gaming, so most of these games will still perform as well as they did on the Raspberry Pi 4. If you guys remember, we adjusted our settings, lowering the resolution and getting a lot of these games to play. That really hasn't improved too much for some of the games. However, because the Raspberry Pi 5 is a little bit more powerful, it does see a little bit of adjustment, but you will need to set up your corresponding emulators, either using less HD or parallel in order to run some of these games in its best optimized form. That wasn't so much of a Raspberry Pi 4 issue. That was, again, more or less a dedicated emulation thing where the games need to be associated with this corresponding emulator. So the Raspberry Pi 5 really doesn't take advantage of too much of that, even though the power and the performance is there. But most of the N64 games will run a little bit better than what you've had previously. Now, as for Sega Saturn, the Pi 5 does offer a little bit more power and performance in terms of what we had on the Pi 4. But for the most part, most of the games ran pretty fine on the Sega Saturn. But the biggest benefit on the Pi 5 versus the Pi 4 is that you can upscale and get a little bit better, crisper, clear quality in terms of the emulation for the Sega Saturn. Again, if you lowered your resolution and ran everything as it picked out the right emulator, a lot of the games ran fine. I know there's a lot of videos showing that Sega Saturn finally runs, but honestly, that was not the case. But you do get a little bit of performance advantage on the Pi 5. As you guys saw earlier, Die Hard, the arcade game, does run at a semi-full speed. It's still missing sounds and whatnot. But for some of the other games, such as Virtual Cop 2, let's say Daytona, those ran pretty fine on the Pi 4, except Virtual Cop and Virtual Cop 2, rather. Those are actually running a little bit better, so you guys will be able to take advantage of some of these other titles that really didn't run too well. But I also want to say that in regards to some of these games running, I don't think a lot of this has to do with the Raspberry Pi 5. I've noticed that, for example, even on the Orange Pi 5, some of the Nintendo games, as far as Nintendo Wii games, don't run quite as well, but they do run better on the Pi 5. And so I do believe that the Bookworm OS has added some additional optimizations in there, which really doesn't have anything too much to do with the single board computer or the power advantages that it does have to add. So I do believe that is the case while a lot of these other emulators are running. In fact, when I ran Bookworm on the Raspberry Pi 4, there were some better optimizations as far as the game running a little bit better in terms of cloud gaming. I didn't get too far into detail in terms of Retropie. I didn't really test that, but I did notice that there was some video improvements on that with the new Bookworm OS. And I believe a lot of the performances that we're seeing is dedicated to the OS and not so much to do with the single board computer taking advantage of it as it is. But we'll save all that for another video. Just wanted to give you guys a quick overlook as what you will have to expect today in this video. Again, we're not going to go over 3DO and all the Atari games and Atari Lynx, even though all those do run better with this Raspberry Pi 5. But please make sure you hit the notification bell, like and subscribe. I will have some subsequent follow-up videos. I know I got ahead of myself because I wanted to do a follow-up and showcase the open boxing of my Pi 5, etc., etc. But I know a lot of you are waiting for the Supreme build, wanted to know exactly what Retropie could do with this. And please keep in mind that the official team is not going to port over or support Nintendo game, I think it was GameCube. No, not GameCube. The Nintendo Wii and also PS2 emulation. That would have to be up to you or community members like us to integrate it ourselves to add it, because that was something that they were not going to add. So if you guys have any questions, make sure you comment in the video description below. I know there's a lot to cover, which is why I will have several subsequent follow-up videos. And I'm sure most of you are wondering what is going to be the difference between the Raspberry Pi 5 and the Orange Pi 5 in terms of performance, in terms of everything it can do. I've been recording a lot of clips, building up a great showcase so you guys can see what's the difference between the two boards. What are your full thoughts on the Raspberry Pi 5 in terms of where we are now and where the market is? But the Supreme team is happy to bring this to you. I don't have an estimated release date. I'm not sure if or when I'm going to release a fully loaded image. I can tell you one thing, it's not going to be fully loaded, because just to give you an idea, typically when we make a fully loaded image, you try to load as much images, snaps, and video artwork with all the ROMs. And that was very simple to do with the Raspberry Pi 4, because you had your Atari classics, you had your arcade, you had Lynx, you had Daphne, you had your Dreamcast, and all those pretty much ran fine. The only problem is now, if you're trying to make a fully loaded image and you include PS2, for example, that's over 25 gigabytes. No, wait, 25 terabytes, I'm sorry. So yeah, that library is pretty large. So we're not going to look at 1 terabyte images and 2 terabytes when just that ROM set alone from PS2. And of course, trying to get some stuff to work, but just a dedicated library itself is about 25 terabytes. So with that being said, I will catch you guys later. This is KDK kiodiekin signing out. I will catch you guys later. Peace out.